Morning, everyone. Right, in 2007, I had the opportunity to take over our intranet modernization project, and being able to lead that project was a fantastic opportunity for me, and ran that project for about 3 years. And in 2009, we launched for the first time, and the year after that was just constant upgrades and improvements and new additions that we were rolling out. And even to this day, there's been continuous improvements being made to our platform. But in 2010, I had the chance to take 8 months off for parental leave, but before doing that, my director said, why don't you just sit down and take these couple of months, hand over the project to other people and kind of shadow them a bit, but take the time to write out what's left, where we need to go from here on out. Because we had done so much, but there was so much left to do. And I said that, and I wanted to do this exercise. So I decided to not only write what was to come, but write out what I had done in the last 3 years, why we had done it. And sort of, after a couple of months, this 30-page document had been created, and I had all this stuff written down, and it started to really form a roadmap. And at the end of the day, the goal was collaboration. We wanted our people in our organization to collaborate more. And it all stemmed from the web access, the web platform internally. So everything we had built was to get us to that point. And that's what I want to share with you today, is sort of an abbreviated version of what that roadmap looks like. Firstly, when I took over the project, I was already a Drupal enthusiast and somewhat of an expert. I had been doing Drupal for a couple years, and there was no way I was going to run this project without using Drupal as the technology. And our executives and everybody else fought me and had me write all these long documents to prove that Drupal was the right technology for this, and we never really got it approved, and I just pushed through and we started building. And only after we launched in 2009, I think 3 months later, we finally brought it to the executives and had them stamp that Drupal was the official content management system of our organization. And I also remember that just about 6 months ago, my director of communications was inspirational and instrumental in pulling this off, because he was my only executive ally working with me on this project. And he said to me, confessed 6 months ago, that he said, if I had to do it all over again, I'd do it the same way. I would let you just push ahead and build it, and we would write our policies after. He says, if we had written all the policies and all the guidelines ahead of time, we would never have pulled this off. And so that was really interesting. But all to say, the reason why I used Drupal was not only because I was infatuated with it, but because it's just the most powerful tool out there for our organization. For any organization, I would say. The views concept in Drupal, if anyone's familiar with it, is probably the most powerful piece that comes with this technology. You can do the comparisons of how open source technology versus an enterprise tool, you'll save, 15% on your licensing costs. But at the end of the day, the work effort is still there. You still have to do the work, you still need technical experts, you still need to build the project. But when you're using Drupal, at the end of the day, your workforce, your team, your developers are building up this expertise. And with all the tools that are provided in Drupal, they get to a point where they become more powerful. An experienced Drupal developer can output a display or an interface or a layout or content types, structures in very little time as compared to any of the enterprise tools that you can find out there. And I believe that's all because of the views system. The community is another huge driving force behind Drupal. The way that the community organizes and approves modules is above any other open source system that I've been able to see. The fact that when you're looking for something in Drupal, you need a new module for something, you always know that you can go to Drupal.org and it's going to be there. Versus something like Joomla, if you need a module, you're stuck online searching for it, and you don't know. You may find 5 different modules that do this, 3 people that are charging for it, 2 people don't support it, 1 person supports it, but it's not really working. It doesn't give you any confidence. That's what's the amazing thing about the community of Drupal, is how they organize, but also the people themselves that run it. They're always so helpful, and we've seen countless mentions of that yesterday during the talks. Content types, of course, goes hand in hand with views, and it's so critical that it's now part of Drupal 7 and 8 going forward. And I think that this kind of graphic depicts how, when you put these things together, it really makes Drupal the most important tool. The business problem, though, still remains. And if you're running a technology project in your intranet, nobody's going to be asking you about the technology. And if you bring up the technology, they're going to shut off. You're not going to be able to win that conversation, because these are the things they're worried about. Roles and responsibilities, knowledge management, metadata, sustainability, legal. How are we going to do social networking? Information architecture, employee engagement. There's probably 5 or 10, maybe 15 other buzzwords that can be put into this bubble. But as a leader of an intranet modernization project, you have to worry and you have to solve all these problems. But you can do it. It just requires leadership and vision. It's certainly not easy to pull off, and it takes a while to piece it all together. But if you know where you're going and you know how to get there, that will inspire your executives to trust you and to let the project move forward. I think at the end of the day, I had a director at the time that believed in me, and I was able to pull together the right team members, and together we were able to come up with a vision that we knew was going to work. And just having that confidence is crucial in being able to move forward. So how do you get there? This is my view of how we get to collaboration for an intranet. You have to start with your information architecture. Once you've got all your content defined, you can then start piecing together the structure of your website. What is it going to look like? How are things going to display? And then you need to populate it. You need to publish content to it. And then you can roll out social networking. But so many organizations will have a system for their corporate content, and then launch a social media tool or a blogging platform separately, or they'll do it in different orders. They won't do it in an integrated fashion, and that, as you'll see in my presentation, is detrimental to bringing people together. Most of the executives are very reluctant to take the water cooler conversation and bring it online. They want people to be focused on business. And it's okay if they share some interests and socialize a little bit, but at the end of the day, they want to know that this bringing together of people, this networking, is going to lead to the furthering of the mission of the organization. And only then can you get to this mode where you have an increased collaboration. At the end of the day, I think engagement is the biggest piece. It wasn't an easy sell at the beginning. When we started our project, we had an intranet of static HTML and XML pages, of hundreds of thousands of pages. Nothing was changed. Everything was broken. 55% of all links were broken. It was a nightmare. We ran some statistics. It was unbelievable. The only thing that would change would be the master homepage, and it was so archaic that nobody wanted to go to there. So all these developers in different teams would start to stand up their own platforms, and they would spawn these momentums of collaboration. Some would take off, and others, and we found ourselves with a whole disconnected network of websites. And what we worked really hard to do was to shut all those down and to build one platform where everyone was going to work together on. And in order to do that, I had to go in and convince all these development teams that this platform was going to do what they needed, and if they could buy into this, that everybody else would. So engagement is key. People need to believe that they're going to be able to do the things that they want, even though it's being run by corporate. So how do you do your information architecture? The way we break it down is, and I would advise that this is either 80 or 90% efficient for any organization. I remember sitting down in the pub for lunch one day with a coworker and trying to figure this out, and we basically just grabbed a white piece of paper and we started drawing out bubbles of all the content types, and it just this lightning bolt hit us, and we said, well, there's different levels of content. We can't just have everybody create anything. It's primary content. And primary content is the bone, the walls or the pillars of your system. You need 4 things: users and groups. So all the people that work in your organization, those are your users. How they group together, whether it's a hierarchical group or a lateral working group, those are all groups of people, and those have to be captured, and that's primary content. The projects and the services will define everything that everybody does in the organization, or at least should. If you're working for an organization, you're either working on operational stuff, keeping the lights on, you're just doing that, which is the services, or you're building new things. You're running a project, you're working on a project that's going to maybe create a new service or build a new product. So we kind of realize that if we defined all the projects and all the services, then we've defined all the activities that everyone in the organization is doing. And then you take a look at secondary content. Things like advertisement buttons are needed. People want to advertise their project. They want to advertise this new service. They want to advertise an initiative that's going on. They want alerts. Sometimes there's a system that's down, so you want to create an alert and post that online. You want to broadcast announcements of something new that's happening, or the next event that's going on. You want to announce it. You want to create those events and have them in a calendar. You want to post documents online, newsletters, polls, resources, courses, web forms. You could probably add a dozen content types in here in this space, but what we realize is all these secondary content types, their only purpose is to augment the value of the primary content types. And if they're not associated to a primary content type, they'll lose their value. They're there to increase the value of the primary content types. And user-generated content needs to be treated separately. These are the content types that anyone in the organization should be able to create without approvals, without translation, without any other process getting in the way. It should be free-flowing. So things like audio files, blog entries, comments, forum topics, photo albums, questions, tweets, videos. So the next step is to define all your content objects. So you got to take all those content types and start to map them out. What's the metadata around every single one of those objects, and go ahead and build those content types. And think strategically about how you use node references, because those node references, how you connect all these content types together, is going to be critical for how you're going to be able to display all this enriched information. So once you've defined all this, you have all your content defined. You now understand your content, and you can move on to the next step, where you're focusing now on structure. So what we do is we take each one of those primary nodes, the projects, the services, the groups, even the users get a little home page. If you click on a user, you go to his page, you get kind of a mini home page for that user. Picture of the person, little information from the directory, and then you start to pull in things that are related to them. Maybe some blogs that they've posted, comments that they've posted. You do the same with your groups. So you create a group, and you have the announcements, you have advertisements, events, all these things that are put together in Drupal language you would use a panel to do this. So you create all these little things would be views pulling information that relates to that main group. So they're kind of mashups at the end of the day. And on your primary content types, you want to turn comments off. You don't want to allow that because it's going to get out of hand. And the primary content types are the backbone of the internet, of your intranet. You don't necessarily want people to be commenting on some organizational group. Rather, you want them to be commenting on the activities of that group. So the secondary content is here displayed. So this is the same layout in the first slide, just that if you notice, all those little lists are being pulled from the secondary content types that link to that primary content. And they serve to enrich, and this is where this type of content can be created by content publishers. And we'll talk about that in a second, but at the end of the day, those content publishers who are allowed to create secondary content types need training. And comments could be turned on any one of those objects. And for user-generated content, anyone can create this. No training is required. Comments are definitely turned on. And you start to be able to pull some of that user-generated content and display it on your primary layouts. So if you had a project, for instance, and you were pulling in all this information, some of those are secondary. You could also pull in a feed of the community buzz around that project. So if you've structured your content properly and people are posting user-generated content, like a comment or a blog, and they're able to easily relate that to a project or relate that to a service or relate that to a group, that gives you, as the webmaster, with views, an easy ability to start to pull in some of this user-generated content and display it on that project page or on that service page or on that group page. And the last part of the structure is to structure your navigation. How are people going to navigate your web? And you want to have things that are organizational. You want to have things that are focused around the mission. Your tools could be direct links to the directory, it could be links to visitor requests, it could be links to a whole gamut of tools that you have within your organization. And you want to have a community section. So you want to make it so that users are able to navigate all of this information from the corporate intranet at one place. And the community angle starts to create momentum on its own. The mission is essential because this is where you're going to be able to navigate all your primary content types and your secondary content types. And the organization, you can have things that are organizational, like you could add links to high-level groups like your CIO or your HR department or your finance department. People need to navigate information differently, so at the end of the day, you need to provide multiple ways of navigating information. Some people want to do it in a hierarchical fashion, some people want to do it in a functional fashion. So you want to allow a navigation that works both ways. Now that you have your primary content types defined, these layouts that I came up with, here, you need to define them all. So you want to have a master page for each one of those content types. The master projects page, a place where users can go and browse all the projects that are in the organization. A place where the master blogs page, for instance, it would be the feed of the most recent blog post being published. You need master pages for all of these so that users can access them easily. So now that your content is all connected, you can move on to the next step, which is populating your intranet. Content publishing should be done by publishers. You want to build and foster a community of them. We took the approach that the more publishers we had, the better it was going to be. The more people that can contribute to this mass volume of content. If we only had a few people doing it, it would never grow as fast as it could if we had a whole community. So we also used to have web publishers before we started. The web publishers all needed training, and they all had this technical title, web publisher. And it was really challenging to go out and get a lot of web publishers because they all wanted raises, and they all felt that their job descriptions were changing. And so when we came up with this system, we started marketing this as no technical training necessary, no technical skills necessary. All you got to do is take one course, a one-day course, and you're ready to go. And we also sort of made them want to be a content publisher because we didn't, even though we were driving the project, we stayed away from creating content. We wouldn't populate the projects, we wouldn't populate the group pages. we would say, if you want to populate your information, if you want to share what you're doing with the rest of the organization, you got to train your own content publishers. And this momentum built. All of a sudden, with an organization of just over 2,000 people, within a year and a half, we had over 200 people trained. About 10% of the organization took the full one-day course and became content publishers. At the end of the day, it's about ownership. If you own your content, if your corporate team starts to claim ownership of content, there's going to be no momentum for people to want to update that information because they didn't create it in the first place. But if you let them create it, then they will take ownership and they will make sure that it's always up to date. So once you've built your content publisher system and training, you also have to set up your access permissions. So the way we kind of organized it was, like I've kind of been explaining, primary content is the only pieces of content that we would hold control over. In not our team that would create them, but approvals would be required. This is where you set up a lot of your workflows. We would hand over things like projects to the project management office. So if someone wanted to post a project, they would have to go through the PMO for approval. If we wanted to create services, well, our service catalog was managed by our CIO, so there was a team in there that would have to go and approve them. Things like users were automatically created because we were pulling them from directory. As soon as an employee joined, the user profile was set up and they were able to log in. And groups were pulled from the directory as well. Anytime someone in an organization wants to create a working group or any kind of lateral group, they would use it in the directory. And if they wanted to, well, any of the hierarchical groups already existed, so those groups were pulled from the directory as well. The secondary content was up to content publishers. So if anyone, if an executive wanted something broadcasted on their homepage, they would have to go and channel that through a content publisher. And what was nice, we tried to stay away from putting too much hard processes in place. We said to some executives wanted more control, and other executives wanted less control. And so we said that with this kind of system, if they want control, all they have to do is hire or nominate one content publisher or a small set of content publishers and run everything through them and give clear direction as to what should be posted and when. Another executive that wanted more open approach would say, anyone wants to be a content publisher, and they could nominate 10 or 15 if they wanted within their directorate, and we'd just tell them to work together and sort of give them some guidance. So we found too that when we set this up, a lot of executives were really worried about who was going to be posting information that related to their business. And they pushed hard for us to set up all these hard workflows and these hard processes. But at the end of the day, none of it was going to allow for flexibility. And without this flexibility, this whole system would have collapsed. It would never have survived as long as it has today. So if we look at the outer layers for user-generated content, this is anyone who can create this, and no training was required or has ever been required for users to post content online. We've built it in a way, we've tried to keep it very simple, the interface is almost self-explanatory. But we did run a lot of optional training, so we would have post how-tos or run little workshops that people could sign up for if they wanted to understand what all this social networking was about or all this social media. Governance is certainly important when you're publishing content on your intranet. Certainly some process is required, and we convinced our executives to take a passive approach, called it passive content moderation. And so, especially when we're talking about the user-generated content, the fear is that people are going to get out of hand, or people are going to get disrespectful, people are going to be posting stuff that doesn't belong online. So what we said is you have to trust your employees. This is an intranet. It is quite different from being on the internet. Because you're on an intranet, you're in a closed space, people know generally that you're there to work, and the risks of the conversations getting out of hand are a lot lower than what they exist on the internet. But they still are possible. So we decided to use this kind of flag as inappropriate link, and you can pull this off just with the 5-star module or the flag module, I believe. Applied this thing to all our user-generated content types. So anytime someone posted a comment, a forum topic, a blog, or a tweet, there would always be a flag as inappropriate link. So if anyone felt that this content was inappropriate in any way, if it was against the values of the organization or someone was attacking another person, they could flag it. So you empower the workforce to do your moderation, your content moderation for you. We published a netiquette document, which is kind of a 2-pager that said, do's and don't do's, how to be respectful online, and we also used expiration dates. Every piece of content that gets published would have 6 months, I think it was 6 months what we agreed on. And if that piece of content hadn't been edited within 6 months, an email would go out to the author, the owner of that page, and sort of warn them that this page will come offline automatically if you don't do something about it. And if you edit your node and update it, you can reset that counter. And this was to solve that big mess that we had created 10 years ago, which is hundreds of thousands of pages, all stale and stagnant, that nobody uses anymore. So we put in this expiration model to keep things fresh. The flag is inappropriate issues get escalated to a working group. This, I think, was very important in pulling all of this off, and definitely something I would recommend to any organization. We called it the Netiquette Advisory Committee, but you can obviously call it anything you want. At the end of the day, we had our Director of Communications there, we had someone from HR, we had someone from the CIO. You bring in the right people, and any of the issues that are flagged through the community would get raised up to this board. And over time, we got better and better at dealing with the issues. So the issues that were able to be addressed without a meeting were done in that fashion. But I remember at the beginning, right off the bat, we had 2 people sort of attacking each other about some union matters, and it got quite personal, and it was flagged and it was brought up to the board, and we removed their posts, and there was discipline that followed. So there will be issues, and at the end of the day, if you're trying to pull this project off within your organization, you can't turn around and say to your executives that it won't happen. You have to tell them it will happen, but it's not going to happen as often as you think. And if it does happen, it's not the end of the world. If we set up the right processes to deal with it in an appropriate manner, it's going to be fine. Content publishing, you also have to open the dialogue. So now that you have your publishers, you've got content being created, you want to encourage participation, and you don't want to interfere with the user content. You want to even highlight some interesting dialogue. So if you see something that's happening in the blogs or in the forums or some comments that are interesting, and then maybe you're in the communications department, why not use that, and write an announcement and post it online to say, hey, look what's going on here, or post links to it. If you're in those sort of corporate teams that are driving communications or driving running a project, and you see that there's some interesting dialogue about your project, highlight it. Right? So everybody is empowered to be able to share information online and even highlight some of the interesting stuff that may be going on in a subset of the intranet. And there's this rule that my director of communications shared with me, which I don't think he invented it, but it's the 1990 rule, and it's quite true. At the end of the day, you have, out of 100 people, you'll have one very, very avid, extremely engaged user. And we have that in our organization. We have one person that blogs every day. He has not missed a day in 2.5 years. It's unbelievable. But there are other people as well. Out of hundreds of people that are blogging, there's only 10 or 15 of them that are really involved, that post quite regularly. But there's 9 or so of those 100 people that are always commenting, that are in on the dialogue and very active. And a lot of people would say, especially the executives would challenge me and say, why would we want to create this blogging platform and have so that 5 people can blog and so that 10 people can converse? And at the end of the day, the reality is that out of that 100 people, 90% of the people are watching. 90% of the people are following that dialogue. And I remember him sharing, the director of communications sharing with me, he said, after a blog was posted, he walked over to, was it the kitchenette place, and he heard two people talking about what was posted online, right? And these people have never posted anything, but they were talking about it. So whatever's going to happen on that space, on that user-generated space within your intranet, everybody will be watching, and that's important to remember. And it's a good thing to use in sort of selling the value of it to your executives. So now that your content is being built collectively, you can move on to the next step, which is social networking. So the key steps to pulling off social networking within your organization would be to start with building an extensive user profile. Then, once you've got this profile built, you can start to build functionality around things like the skills or other data that exist within that profile. And then you can start to expose all user information on all the posts that are done online. Sort of give credit to people who are posting those information and link back to their profiles so that you're enabling people to get to know each other. Who posted this? Who's writing this? Who's talking about that? Enable that sort of connection to happen. And the key of it all is to relinquish control. You don't want to have this content to be approved. You don't want it to have to be translated or any kind of oversight. As minimal oversight as possible. For your user profile, start with the basics, skills and hobbies. At the end of the day, it's easy for people to post, and it's going to lead to, it's conversation starters. I'm an expert at A, B, and C. I'm interested in A, B, and C. Who are your buddies? Allow people to add friends within their profile, colleagues, or and allow them to create projects and their experience. Functionality-wise, it can get really interesting. We turned on voting capability on all user-generated content. So anyone who posts a comment or a forum post or a blog, people can like it. The old Facebook like or the thumbs up kind of approach. We did a thumbs up, thumbs down. So people can vote. And these votes, even though they seem at the surface quite insignificant and small, they actually add tremendous value. Not everybody is brave enough to blog online or to even write a comment. But there's a whole crowd of people that be brave enough to vote, right? It's a nice way for them to get their opinions out there online and participate in that dialogue. And it's a building block. Once they start voting more, they start to build confidence, and then all of a sudden they start commenting. And then they feel, well, now that I'm commenting, now they can blog about something. Today in our organization, we have it's an agency, and so we have a chief, we call him the chief, who runs our organization. And he blogs quite regularly. And all the time he wants to blog more and more, and his staff is always saying, well, you can't blog about this, you can't blog about that. But he just wants to get information out, and it's really nice to see. We start seeing a lot more executives within the organization blog. But we launched this platform, all the blogging and commenting forums were launched in 2009. And it took a while before confidence started to build, and before more than those 5 same people started to blog. Others wanted to see where this was going to go, what was going to happen, what was the feedback like, how are people being responding to other people posting information, and people started seeing that it wasn't that bad, that it was actually quite helpful, and now we find that today, out of 2,400 people, there's probably been 300 or 400 people who posted a blog post, so it's quite successful. The skills page is in your profile. So if I claim I'm an expert in project management, and you make that link, that word, a hyperlink, and it goes to a page where I can find other project managers, that is a way to build these centers of expertise and to tap into the power of your user profile data. If I'm trying to accomplish a project and I need to reach out to an expert in project management, well, I can easily just go to the skills page, click on project management, and go and see all these self-proclaimed project managers. And if you take it to the next level where people can vote on your skills, sort of endorse you. So just like LinkedIn, right? Really at the end of the day, LinkedIn has mastered all of these things, and if you can kind of replicate some of those key concepts that they've done and do those internally, this is the power of your social networking. We haven't done this, but I was able to see another agency who had done this, is this opt-in mentoring, as I call it. So on your user profile, you can write all your skills, and then you have a checkbox. It's, are you open to provide mentoring? You just say yes. And then anyone who goes to the skills page and clicks on a skill can see all the people who have that skill, and then can see those that are open for mentoring and can contact them. So it's sort of just self-sufficient system, and so easy to pull off with the technology. Like I said, you want to hyperlink all the usernames, display author information as much as you can across the intranet. Give credit to people who are posting. Even the content publishers, you need to give them credit. Any secondary content or user-generated content, they all need to have information about who's posting that information and a link back to their profile. Show statistics, display top contributors. You know, on your master blog page, have something on the side that says, you know, who are the top 10 bloggers? What are the blog posts with the top comments, the most comments? Which ones are the ones with the most votes? Things like that. Pride is a big motivator, and if you start to give credit, or give visibility to people who are posting and sharing their ideas, those who share thrive on that. They want that feedback. They want to know that people are listening, and it makes them want to post even more. So now your content is connecting people, and I think that's sort of my way of summarizing the value of your social networking, and you're connecting people not only on a social level at all, you're actually connecting people around your mission, because you've got lots of information posted about projects, services, all the announcements, all the corporate stuff, that's the corporate activity, all the mission activity is documented, it's there, and you get this networking, social networking layer laid on top of all of it. You're now connecting people around your mission. And you can now start to increase your collaboration. The trouble with collaboration is that it's a very dirty word. At the end of the day, any of the software tools that we have allow us to collaborate. You know? Outlook is a collaboration tool. We can talk to each other. I can send you a document, you can send it back. You know, at the end of the day, we're collaborating. It's not the most efficient collaboration tool, but it's still collaboration. There are tons of collaboration tools that exist. But at the end of the day, I think that as an organization, if we stop focusing on what the tools are, we need to focus on how do we get more people to collaborate. And that's what all this infrastructure can provide. Knowing who you need to work with is what's most important. As we say, you know, more heads are better than one. And if I'm trying to, you know, in all my experience, I've been in government for 13 years, and all my ability to pull off projects has been because I know who to call when something goes wrong, or if I have a question, I know who to call. That ability, that resourcefulness that I've been able to develop has helped me accomplish a lot and provide value to my organization. So if we can share this sort of ability or give this capability to everybody in the organization through our intranet web, that's where your organization is going to thrive, where people are going to work together at greater levels. Collaboration starts with an idea. You know, there was some talk about organic groups yesterday, and you know, we've played around with that and creating an area where people can create their own group spaces, whether it's private, controlled, or public, and add members and start to collaborate within sort of communities of interest. This is another aspect that your intranet infrastructure can provide beyond any kind of whiteboarding tool or chat tool or instant messaging. I mean, those are all collaboration tools at the end of the day. But the web itself can provide this functional type of collaboration that can't necessarily be found in some of the other tools. So the benefits of collaboration, I've found that it has to be available to everyone, and it has to be merit-based and self-organizing. If you try to force collaboration or force people to work together, it rarely is successful. But if they're able to self-organize, and those who contribute the most through their merit are able to get recognized, and that anyone can do this, it's accessible to anyone, if you can create that sort of environment, you'll have the most success. Collaboration can help you expand and enrich topics of interest through these communities of interest. And when you think about the user profile, just clicking on that one skill, we've got this whole group together, and we can start a space, we can start a working group, and we can collaborate together. We can also improve tradecraft by working with like-minded or people that work in the same types of fields, and we can solidify teams. So the summary of collaboration, I think at the end of the day, it's about engagement. You want a workforce that wants to work together and believes in the internet solution that's there, and feels that they have a voice, that they can contribute to that conversation. People want to be a part of a common purpose, and they want to make a difference. And when people create together, they can achieve things that would otherwise be impossible on their own. And now, your content is now driving teamwork. And I think at the end of the day, my big message is that content is king, as that expression we've all heard. Content drives everything, especially in an organization like this. Build your content, structure it, display it, create it, and have social networking around it, and people will work together on that content. So I think at the end of the day, integrating corporate content with user-generated content will lead to strong corporate engagement and keep collaboration focused on the mission. And Drupal is an amazing enabler of this that provides agility and sustainability. And I think that we can't let go of that. At the end of the day, if you have a large enterprise tool, you don't have that flexibility. You can't shift. You can't rearrange your content structures easily. You can't change the way the software works without going back to the vendor and waiting months and months and paying huge amounts of dollars. The open source community, the nature of Drupal allows for this agility and allows you to have a sustainable internet presence in your organization. Thank you very much for your time, and hope you enjoy the day. Yeah, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer a few. Yes?
You want to point out what you have in
Yeah, at 12:15 I'm giving a session on, I'm going to focus in on user-generated content a bit and talk about the power of a social FAQ system within your organization. So if anyone wants to attend that, we can continue the conversation. Yes?
This was all done with Drupal?
Yes.
And was it mostly sort of soft modules, or was there a lot of customization, in particular some of the collaboration stuff?
It was all done as much as possible out of the box, not out of the box, but core contributed modules. I actually, while I was in charge for 3 years, had a no-code policy. Developers were not allowed to code anything without checking with me, and when the situation came up, I would bring my architect in, I'd bring the team lead in, and the developer who wanted to do it, and we'd just have it out on the whiteboard. And I was always I've always seen Drupal as a glorified Lego kit. All the pieces are there, and so I would just continuously challenge all these decisions to code anything and say, let's rethink it, right? There's so many other ways to do it with the modules that are out there.
So to accomplish what you just showed us, there was some coding?
No, there wasn't. And I don't believe that even today that you need to do any PHP module building or code to make any of this happen, except perhaps when it comes into those workflows. Like if you want to have a sophisticated, depends how sophisticated you want to get with your workflows. But even today, just a plain Jane translation workflow or approval workflow can be done without coding.
And with those approvals, talk about some departments wanted more control. Did they just do it internally with communications, or did you set up real workflow stuff for them?
No, we had really basic workflow. Just all the primary and secondary content types needed to be translated before they go live. So we had to code one little piece in where a notification would get sent to our translation team, and they would then be able to translate the pages and then give them back to the content publisher to publish them live. But we didn't have any other workflows. At the end of the day, it was the content publisher community, and whatever the executives were responsible for all their content, and they just channeled their direction through them.
And final question, what percentage of it is bilingual?
100% of the primary and secondary content types were bilingual. There's user-generated. If our executive would publish a blog, he'd always post first his blog in French and paste the English right after, or English-French, and post it as one blog item.
You mentioned that you had, within these different directorates, organizations that were standing up their own intranet presence, their own technology. How did you convince them to abandon what they had been doing and that level of control that they had to come to you and work with you? Was there anything that you were able to do to get them to buy in?
I knew a lot of them. I had worked in those teams before, and so it was easy for me to approach them. And whenever I made the case to them, I said, well, what is your system doing? What's your requirements? What do you need? And so, well, we wanted to do this. I said, and I just make a deal. I said, listen, if I can build what you're doing inside of our corporate internet solution, will you agree to shut this down? Right? And then 90% of them would say yes. So, I mean, for sure. I mean, we have a technical organization, so there's still a few subsets of cells of technical web things that are happening, but nobody's trying to recreate a blogging platform. Nobody's trying to recreate a little internal tweet system, because we've got it, right, and it works and it does the job. But it's a negotiation. Yeah, different.
Is this a distribution like the web distribution, or is it built in that manner at all?
No, it's not published or shared. It's just an internal system.
How do we get it?
You build it. Yeah. Yes?
So you talk about intranet. How much are we applying it to
Yeah. So over the last couple of years, we've trying to renew our external presence, and a lot of the tools that we're reusing are being sort of copy and pasted over to the external side. But the problem space isn't the same. Like, we don't need all these content types and all this user-generated stuff externally. So they're trying to leverage some of the pieces they can, but they're still using Drupal, which is nice, and because we can take advantage of all this expertise that we've built up.
you find that easy now that they're going by, but do they find it easy to
No, not at all. It's not easy.
And
It's a different game, right? It's a different problem you're solving.
just keep in mind, we're going to do a whole other session on it, you can probably ask me more questions. But I can't.
Okay.
So thank you, Jason.
Thank you very much.